Hello and welcome to week 5. The topic for this week is pre-assessment preparations. By this point in the semester, everybody should have found a student to assess or to conduct a learning media assessment. Prior to conducting any assessment, any special education assessment or vision assessment, a permission to assess form needs to be filled out by the parents or the family members. That's very important. Just make sure that you get these taken care of within the next week or so. I've posted a parent consent form under this week's documents for you to use before the assessment, so make sure to take care of that. As we start getting into the core and the expanded core curriculum areas, I will be exposing you to a variety of assessment instruments. However, there is no way for this exposure to be comprehensive. Because of these, I believe it is a good practice to collaborate with other teachers of the visually impaired or TVIs regarding the types of assessments they like to use. One of the habits that I got into as a TBI was keeping a 3-ring binder of blank assessment forms that I came across, and now I keep the same file electronically on my computer. This gives me quite a toolbox to pull from when I'm conducting assessment with students. It is important to remember that since assessment is the cornerstone of educational programming, and educational programming is supposed to be tailored to the individual child, you cannot execute the same series of assessments for every student every 3 years. So that's very important to remember when conducting assessments. Well, major assessments need to occur every year or every 3 years. Assessment needs to be frequent and ongoing. In fact, those assessment results should not be a surprise if the educational team has constantly and effectively measured progress. Therefore, one of the major goals of pre-assessment planning is to decide what is going to be assessed, what are you going to be assessing the student on, why is it being assessed, and how best to assess the identified areas. When deciding how to best assess the student, the educational team needs to decide if multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, or interdisciplinary assessments are more appropriate. Multidisciplinary assessment usually has each team member conducting their own battery of tests. Interdisciplinary assessment requires that the educational team collectively decide how to best assess the student and who should do which piece of the assessment. And with the transdisciplinary assessment, one person interacts with the student or the child on a set of predetermined skills or tasks, while the other members of the assessment team individually look for information relevant to the child's functioning in each area. While many people tend to rush through this stage of the assessment process, pre-planning can save you a lot of time. One of the first things that I always do is to review my records to discern as much information as possible. From that point, I determine what information I still need to gather, and I then review all the assessment instruments that are available to me. And finally, I decide how, when, and with whom I will conduct each assessment. Instead of administering each assessment separately or individually, I tend to do as much overlap as possible when conducting this assessment, so I don't waste my time or I have to take the student out of the classroom too much. I try to group functional vision, learning media assessment, and assistive technology assessments together. Also, I frequently am able to overlap the orientation and mobility and the independent living skills assessments together. This requires me to have a solid grasp on all the questions that I'm going to ask, but I believe that this will save me time. So you might want to take that into consideration and think about that when you're conducting assessments in the future.